Okay, we are ready to begin. Good evening. I think we are live on Facebook and Zoom. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's good to see you. And we're going to have an interesting topic today, an interesting discussion, hopefully. And the topic is the most environment-friendly food. So feel free to throw some questions into the chat box on Zoom, into some Facebook comments as well. I'll try to look at that, or just announce them right here on Zoom. And here we go. So the story of this week takes us back to the time when Jewish people were in the desert. So this was shortly after they came out of Egypt. They were just recently released and freed from the slavery in Egypt, and now they were in the desert. The Jewish people knew that they would be traveling for some time in the desert. They knew that it would be a while. So of course they took with them, and they packed with them plenty of food so they would have what to eat while traveling in the desert. But after about a month of traveling in the desert, eventually the food ran out, and they needed to find another solution. So the Jewish people, they turned to Moshe and Aaron and asking for food. Next morning, a miracle happened, and from the sky, from the heavens, fell some type of edible substance, and it was called mun, or manna. And this was a miracle that happened on that first morning. All of a sudden, this food came from heaven, fell from the sky, but this didn't just happen once, it happened daily. For 40 years, while the Jewish people wandered through the desert every single day, with some exception, as we'll see a little bit later on. Every single day, there was this mun coming from heaven, and this is what sustained them. This is what they ate. This is what they enjoyed throughout their entire journey, wandering around the desert. It was after 40 years that the Jewish people finally entered into the land of Israel. They conquered Israel, and that's when the mun stopped. But throughout all of their time in the desert, for 40 entire years, every single day, the Jewish people ate the mun. So let's talk a little bit more about this mystery food, this mysterious food, and find out what it's all about. So first, the meaning of the word mun. What is this unusual word? Because it doesn't mean food. So what does it mean? And so it turns out that there are various opinions, various explanations as to what the word mun actually means. Some say that mun means portion, like a portion of food. So basically the Jewish people did not know what it was that fell from the sky. But what they did recognize and what they did understand was that it was a portion of something ready to eat. And so they called it exactly that. They called it a portion because it was a portion of something. They didn't know what it was, something that was ready to eat. Others explain that mun is actually comes from an Egyptian word, and it means what? And basically, the Jewish people were in Egypt. They lived in Egypt for more than 200 years. So it would make sense that some of the Egyptian language made its way into the Hebrew that they spoke at the time. And so the Egyptian, the word mun comes from Egyptian, according to this explanation, and it means what? What is it? So they asked this question as soon as it came down on the first morning because they had no idea what it was. And it was a mystery. What type of food is this? What type of miracle is this? And so eventually this became the name of the food. It became known as their question, what? Mun, what is this? Because they actually did not know what this food is. So this is the second explanation that the word man actually means what? As in, what is this? What is this food? We have no idea. A third explanation as to the meaning of the word man is that man means importance or something something of a high regard. And the idea is that, again, the Jewish people did not know what this food was. They had no idea what this miracle was. But what they did know, what they were absolutely sure about, was that this was something special and that this was a miracle. So they called it man because man means something of importance. So these are the three explanations, three commentaries for the meaning of the word man. The first one is that man means a portion. So because they knew that it was a portion of food, even though they didn't know much more. Second explanation is that it comes from the Egyptian word for what? Because again, this was their question, what is it? And the third commentary is that it means something of importance. And that was because they recognized that this was something special. This was a miracle, even though they couldn't explain it and they took them time to understand what it was, but they knew right away that it was something special. So the man was a very interesting food, very unusual food, and of course it was a miracle. So let's find out a little bit more of how it looked and how it arrived and how it tasted. So first of all, it was very small. It was the size of a seed, maybe a large seed, but it was fairly small, and the color was quite nice because it looked like fine crystal. So some type of see-through, some type of beautiful looking seed is what the man looked like. How was the man delivered to the Jewish people? So in order that the man should remain clean, there was a wind that came from the north and it blew from the north. This week we had a lot of wind in Iceland. We had a pretty long windstorm. So it feels like a lot of the wind comes from the north. But anyways, the wind kind of swept the ground of the desert ground, and that kind of cleaned it to a certain extent, or blew anything out of the way. After that, it rained. The rain would wash the surface and make it clean for the man. After that, once whatever dirt was blown away and the rain came and washed the ground, then a layer of dew came down. Finally, after the dew came down, the man fell from the sky. After the man fell, a second layer of dew fell on top of the man, and this was kind of to protect the man. It was kind of like a package. It was packaged between these two layers of dew. And so this was a beautiful food. It looked very nice. We'll find out soon how it tasted, but it certainly looked very nice, and it was packaged in a very clean way. It was presented, delivered to the Jewish people in a very clean way, and of course there was no plastic, there was no paper, so it was pretty good for the environment too. No packaging, just natural packaging. Now, something interesting about the man, and this is more of a general idea, is that throughout the Jewish people's journey in the desert for 40 years, they would only eat the man, and the man would come every single day. And the man that they received was only enough for one day, for that day, the day that it fell on. Not only that, they weren't even allowed to save any of the food, any of the man, for future days. So they received enough enough of a portion for the entire day so they could be satisfied, they could be, they could be full, they could be comfortable. But even if they tried to save some of the money for the next day, it was not, it was, it was forbidden to do so. And if somebody would leave over some of the leftovers and not discard it, then it would become wormy and basically not edible. So all of the food that they got was to be eaten fresh just on that day, and they were not supposed to leave it over for the next day. And this shows a beautiful thing about the Jewish people at that time in the desert, how how much faith they had in God, that God was looking after them, and that God was giving them everything that they needed. They didn't worry about what's going to be tomorrow. They didn't worry about what's going to be next week, next year. They believed in God, that just like God gave us food yesterday, gave us food today, He'll provide for us tomorrow, He'll provide for us in the coming week, months, and years ahead. And so this is something very beautiful that we could learn from, as difficult as a situation might be. And especially nowadays, people are struggling and things are very difficult. But at the end, we know that a God, organized that we should somehow manage up until this point, and that He will also continue to look after us for the future. Of course, we have to do everything that we could, but ultimately, the blessing and the opportunities and everything that we have comes from God. So this is a tremendous lesson of faith that we could learn from the Jewish people in the desert, how they had food only one day at a time, and they believed for the next day, for the next week, month, and years. So this is something very special about the Jewish people living at that time, and the people who were enjoying the mun for their daily sustenance. I mentioned before that the Jewish people did not, they collected mun every single day, but there was some exception. And what happened was, on the first Friday after they started receiving the mun, first Friday after the mun started falling, they went out to collect the mun. And what they found was something unusual, something different. What they saw was that there was a double portion of their mun. And so they went to Moshe to understand, what is this all about? Why are we getting two portions today? And Moshe says there are two portions because one is for today, for Friday, and the extra portion is for Shabbat. On Shabbat, it's a day of rest, even though they didn't really have to work at all during their time in the desert. But this was a way of making Shabbat different than the rest of the week. And so they would not collect any mun on Shabbat. Instead, on Friday, they would get a double portion. And now, if you notice at a Shabbat meal, whether it's Shabbat dinner or Shabbat lunch, there are always at least two challahs. When we make the blessing on the challah, there's always two. And this is the reason why we have two. It's because when the Jewish people were in the desert, they got a double portion of the mun. And so we have two challahs on the table, a double portion to remember the miracle of the mun, how God looked after the Jewish people for those years in the desert and gave them mun every single day. And so we eat the challah every single Shabbat. We have two challahs to remember the story and the miracle of the mun. And it also serves as a reminder for this faith in God that we talked about before. When we sit down at the meal and we see the two challahs, we remember that just like back then, God was providing for the Jewish people. Today also, we might have it might be in a different way. And we'll talk about in a bit why that's so. So of course, today we need to work for our food, not like it was back in the desert. we need to find opportunities for whatever work it might be to bring home the bread every single day and at the end of the week. But it still serves as a reminder that God is the one who provides the blessing and opportunities that we have. So what did the mun taste like? What kind of taste did it have? So the Torah describes the mun as something that tasted very good. And what it mentions specifically is a taste of something fried in oil and the taste of honey. So I don't know exactly if this was a combination of the two and what that combination might taste like, but this is something that the Torah mentions, these tastes the Torah mentions. But what we also know about the mun was that it was very individual. So it tasted different depending on the person who was eating it. So to an adult, it tasted like adult food. To a baby, it tasted like baby food. Not only that, the person eating the mun was able to choose what it should taste like, and whatever taste they desired, that's what the mun actually tasted like. So it was a miracle food, not only the way it was delivered, but also in the way it tasted. They could choose any taste that they wanted to feel, and that was the taste of the mun. So they could choose anything. It could be taste like meat. It could taste like fruit. It could taste like vegetables. It could taste like anything, and that was every person's choice. Now, something very interesting is that at some point we see that the Jewish people complained to Moshe, and they said that they missed certain foods, and some of those foods that they mentioned, they said, we miss this food. We had it in Egypt. We don't have it now. We want it. What were those foods? The Torah mentions zucchini, watermelon, leeks, onion, garlic. So these were some foods that the Jewish people were missing, and they were complaining about not having it. So the question is, if they were in fact able to taste any taste that they wanted, so why is it, or why was it that they missed this food? They should be able just to decide that this is the taste they wanted, and that should be the taste that they would feel. So what could this complaint be all about? And what the Talmud explains is that there were in fact certain things that the mun could not taste like. So even if they would choose for the mun to taste like garlic or onion or leek, the mun could not taste like that. And the reason is because some of these vegetables could be harmful for nursing mothers. And so therefore, the mun was created in such a way that it could not taste like any of these things. So this is how we could understand. This is how the Talmud explains how, on the one hand, the Jewish people were able to choose any taste that they desired, but still they complained about not having certain things. Those were the things that they were not able to, that the mun was not able to taste like, no matter for who, because there were some people who could be harmed by some of these flavors. And so therefore, the mun was created in this way that it couldn't taste like these things that might be harmful. Okay, so that's as far as the taste goes. The mun is also called the bread from heaven. Actually, just like nowadays we make a blessing on the bread and on the challah that we eat on Shabbat, the blessing that we say is Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We're thanking God, who is the one who brings forth bread from the earth. The Jewish people in the desert, they would also make a blessing, but they couldn't say that the bread came from the earth because it didn't. They would say, Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. God brings forth, they were thanking God for bringing forth bread from heaven, because that's exactly what it was. And because this was a heavenly food, because it was a miraculous food, so the man contained only nutrition and only things that are good for the body. And so the entire mun, the entire portion, was absorbed by the body. There was no need to, there was no spoil, and there was no need for the body to expel any waste in any of the food, because the food was completely pure, it was completely good, and there were no bad parts to it. So they didn't need to use the bathroom. They didn't need to get rid of any bad parts of the food. It was fully absorbed because it was completely pure. So in many ways, we see how this food is the most environment friendly. The way it was delivered and the packaging was completely natural. So there was no waste in any part of the process, not in the preparation, not in the delivery, and also no waste after eating the food, after eating the man. And this is because it was heavenly. It was the purest kind of food, full of nutrition, and only good. There were no bad parts to the food. So something interesting that happened was that towards the end of this whole man eating experience, towards the end of the Jewish people's journey in the desert, God commanded Moshe to save a portion of the man, and so that it should be kept throughout the generations, throughout Jewish history, and so that Jewish people could see with their own eyes that God sustained the Jewish people throughout their journeys in the desert. So the way this was done was Aaron collected some of the man. It was placed into a jar, and this jar was placed in the Holy of Holies, first in the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the desert, but later on it was placed in the Holy of Holies, in the permanent Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And something very interesting, our sages tell us that when Shlomo HaMelech, when King Solomon built the Holy Temple, he knew that in the future there would be a destruction of the Holy Temple. He knew that it would be invaded. He knew that it would be destroyed. And so in preparation for that, even though it was many years away, it was more than 400 years away, but in preparation for that, for the invasion and for the destruction, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, prepared a system of tunnels and a system of hideouts beneath the Holy Temple. So within the mountain, within the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah, Shlomo HaMelech designed, or he had people design, the system of tunnels, secret tunnels that nobody was able to know, nobody knew about it, nobody was able to go in there, because it was reserved for exactly such a purpose, if and when the Holy Temple would be invaded. So they would be able to put some items from the Holy Temple into safekeeping. And what was most important was the ark that contained the Keruvim, as well as the tablets, the luchot, and together with these other items, it was also this jar of the man that was supposed to serve as a reminder of how God looks after the Jewish people. He looked after the Jewish people in the desert. This was to be together with these items in the Holy of Holies. So when Shlomo HaMelech prepared these, this system of passageways and hideouts, eventually they were used. It was many years later, almost 400 years later. It was 22 years before the temple, before the Bet HaMikdash, the first Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. 22 years prior to that, the king at the time understood that things were not going to be good and things were getting worse. And so he made the decision to hide away the ark and some of the items within it, including the jar that contained the mun. And so the mun is a very important item, and the tradition is that it will be rediscovered together with the ark and the other items. It will be rediscovered with the coming of Mashiach. And so it is a very important item because this is really a very clear reminder how God literally looks after the Jewish people, just like he did during their journeys and their wandering in the desert. In fact, there was one prophet who at one point removed this jar of mun from the Holy of Holies to show it to the Jewish people. He felt that it was important to show them and to tell them that if they follow in God's ways and if they do the right thing, God will certainly give them blessings and reward in return for that. So in fact, we do have some mun hidden away even today. And when Mashiach comes, it will be rediscovered. That is the tradition. Okay, so shortly after the Jewish people started eating the mun, started enjoying the mun, they received Torah, because the Torah was given just 50 days after the Jewish people left Egypt. And so it was a short time after they started receiving the mun that they received the Torah. Torah on Mount Sinai, which we talk about in next week's Torah portion. But the Medrash finds a very powerful connection between receiving the Torah, specifically these people receiving the Torah, because it was connected to their diet and to the food that they were eating. So for 4 decades, basically, the Jewish people were only eating this mun. And throughout that time, basically all they were doing was studying. So they did get into some trouble from time to time. We see some of those episodes in the Torah recorded. So there was some trouble going on. But for the most part, what were the Jewish people doing in the desert? They were studying. They didn't have to work the land. They didn't have to be farmers. They didn't have to be merchants. They had everything that they needed. And so all they did basically was take it easy. They had what to eat. They had their camp. They had where to stay. And so they would spend most of their time in study and prayer. And so the Medrash sees a very strong connection between the occupation of the Jewish people at that time and their diet. They're eating the mun. In fact, the Medrash says that the Torah could only be given to the people who ate mun. Now, this is something perhaps very unusual. Why would the Medrash say that the Torah could only be given to mun eaters? What's so special about this diet? And what's so important about this food that only these people these special people who had the opportunity to eat this special food were able to receive the Torah, from God on Mount Sinai. And to understand this, basically, what happened after 40 years when the Jewish people reached the land of Israel, finally after 40 years, they conquered the land. Torah study always continued. People always studied the Torah, but as a full-time occupation, that was only one tribe, only the tribe of Levi, and perhaps certain select individuals from other tribes spent all of their time studying and in prayer, and not opening a business, and not farming the land. It was only the tribe of Levi. It was their job to serve in the holy temple in the Bet HaMikdash, and it was their job to study Torah. That was their occupation. But most of the Jewish people, it came time to start doing business, to farm the land, to sell merchandise, and to make money, so they could get so they could make a livelihood. And this is where the switch happened from their food from heaven. While they used to eat their food from heaven, now they would get their bread from the earth, of course. And so it changed when the Jewish people arrived in the land of Israel. So the pure food, the perfectly pure food, was no longer. Now the Jewish people were eating regular bread that is not 100% pure. There's all types of stuff in it. And the bread needs to be digested, not like the mun. The mun was absorbed by the body, perfectly absorbed because it was so pure. Regular bread needs to be digested, and there's all kinds of waste that the body produces, but also throughout the entire process of making food, from when you take it from the field, the grain and the stalks. There's all kinds of waste, necessary waste many times, but there is a lot of waste. And we could understand what the Medrash says about the Torah being given specifically to these people who were eating the bread from heaven, mun from heaven, and not to the generation that were eating the regular bread. And the idea behind this is that if you think about it, life is full of waste in so many ways, in things that we do, in our schedules. We spend a lot of time sleeping and eating and running around and doing errands so that we could have what we need and have what's important, so that we could do what's important in life, and so we could have what's important in life. But there's a lot of waste along the way. There perhaps necessary waste, but there's a lot of things that are not connected to our actual what we find purposeful and meaningful. There's a lot of other things that we have to get out of the way before we can reach what's really important. And it's the same thing in all parts of life. There's all types of waste in the way things are prepared, the way things are packaged, and the way the way our lives are. There's just so much that goes to waste, and we're so used to that. We're so used to things being not perfect. We're so used to things having waste kind of part of it, that even when we receive something that is 100% pure, we start taking it apart and start looking for the dirt to get rid of it. So because we're so used to things being not fully pure and not perfect, because nothing is perfect, or at least most things are not perfect, we kind of automatically looked for the blemish. We kind of automatically look for the problem. And this is not only in items we receive, it's also in different parts of our lives. We unfortunately we look for faults in other people sometimes. We look for hidden agendas. We look for the other side, even when someone seems to be doing something good. And it's because people are so used to so much waste in so many different ways, that they're kind of automatically expecting to find some of the dirt, some of the thing that's not natural, some of the bad parts. And we even have this phrase, "It's too good to be true," right? How could something be so good? And this is why, because our lives, in a way, are like this in so many areas. This is why the Torah could only be given to the eaters of the mun, and it's because people who are eating bread, people who are eating regular food, who have which has a lot of dirt in it, which has all kinds of waste in it. So the people who are eating this bread are used to a certain digestion process, and they automatically need to make some waste both in the preparation. Hopefully, we try not to waste, but we don't need to. But there is some waste both in the preparation and in the way our body processes the food. And so the Torah, if the Torah would be given to people of this kind, people who are digesting not only their food, but in a way, everything in life, they're always filtering through to get rid of the bad and just try to find what's good. If the Torah was given to these people, perhaps these people would, because of second nature, try to sift through the Torah and find only the good parts and the parts that they like and the parts that they think is good. And of course, the Torah is 100% pure. And so when the Torah would say, "Love your fellow as yourself," people might say, "Okay, this is very nice," but we could easily come up with all types of exceptions and excuses why this person is not deserving of it or the other person is not deserving of it. And just like our bodies process and need to digest food, and just like throughout our lives we're trying to separate between what's waste and what's good, they could do the same to the Torah. And this is why the Torah was only given to the people who ate the mun, the people who understood what purity is, the people who understood what it means, what perfection is, what something completely natural is, what something completely good is. So of course, in our life today, we need to be like these bread eaters. We need to be able to distinguish between what's good, and we need to reject what's no good. We need to make moral choices, but we also need to understand that sometimes, perhaps not often enough, but sometimes there could be a rare moment of refinement when we receive a gift, something that is fully pure, something that is fully good. And this is how the people were, the people who ate the mun. They understood this refinement, they understood this purity. And so that's why the Torah was given especially to them. So of course we continue to study the Torah today, but we study the Torah and we remember that just like the people back then, they understood purity, and they took the Torah in that way. They took the word of God and understood that this is perfect and this is good. And if they didn't find it, they didn't find the perfection, if they didn't find the purity, they need, that means that we need to look deeper and find that perfection and that only goodness. But this is the idea. The Torah was given especially to these people because this shows us, and this is a lesson for all future generations, how we should be open to the Torah, and we should allow the Torah to nourish us, just like the man nourished the people in the desert physically. The Torah nourishes us spiritually, and we should understand, and we could understand that it is in fact pure. And perhaps today, more than ever before, nowadays there is such a strong emphasis on not being wasteful and protecting the environment. And of course, there is so much in the Torah regarding protecting the environment and the world that we live in. We had a class in the past about the Torah's view on the environment and our responsibilities for it. But perhaps today, more than ever, when society as a whole is focusing so much more than in the past on protecting natural resources and protecting the planet, protecting the world, perhaps we could now also better understand the idea of the idea and the beauty of something perfect, of something completely natural, of something that's completely good, something that's pure. And perhaps we're getting closer to the time of when things are 100% pure, 100% natural, just like they were in the times of the desert to the man eaters, just like to those people. And we are getting, I think we're getting close to that time. Again, we need to always get closer, always make it more pure and more natural, because this will help us amongst many other good things about protecting our environment. And an added benefit is that we understand and we appreciate what purity is, what perfection is, what goodness is, and that's how we could study the Torah. That's how we could understand the Torah. And that's how we could allow the Torah to nourish us in so many ways. I have to admit, I was not looking at the Facebook comments. I see I got a couple of notifications. So let me look at it quickly here in case there's something that somebody wrote that I should respond to. And here, let's see. Okay, I see some of your comments. Hello, Julian. Hello, Heather. Good to see you guys. And I hope that you enjoyed this discussion, and everyone should have a wonderful evening, have a wonderful continuation of the week. And this is always a good topic. This is always an important thing to remember. To remember the mun, all the story of the mun, so many interesting things about it. And in fact, the mun was, I think we could say, the most environmentally friendly food in so many ways. Like we talked throughout this discussion, in the way it was delivered, in the packaging, or lack thereof, I should say, completely natural packaging. The purest food. It was completely absorbed by the body because it was so pure. So let us continue studying the Torah. Let us continue appreciating purity and perfection, and trying to make everything around us more pure, more protected, more natural. And in this way, we also become more pure, because you are what you eat. We become more pure, and we become more receptive for purity, including for spiritual things, the Torah, the mitzvot, and all wonderful things. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.